Hi there, John McAdams here. Thanks a lot for joining me in this video where I talk about the 370 Sako Magnum, also known as the 9.3 by 66mm Sako. I'll tell you a little bit about the history and design characteristics of this round, what its performance specs are like. I will tell you a little bit about this rifle I have in this chambering. We'll shoot a couple different loads in this rifle, see what recoil, accuracy, and velocities are like. So let's start back at the beginning. The Finnish manufacturer Sako developed this cartridge right around 2003 for the European market in particular. They built it in their Sako 85 rifle, which is what this is. That turned out to be a pretty solid chambering. Was reasonably successful, worked pretty darn well on game they were hunting in Scandinavia. Moose, boar, things like that. So with this in mind, the folks at Sako partnered with the folks at Federal and gave the cartridge the 370 Sako moniker to appeal to the American market. Sako continued to produce their rifles in this chambering. Federal started producing ammo in this chambering. So what's the deal with this cartridge? Well, this is essentially a 9.3 by 62mm cartridge that has been slightly modified. As you can see, case is lengthened a little bit, shoulder moved a little bit farther forward, and it is loaded to a little bit higher pressure. SAMI specs are 60,000 PSI for the 370 Sako and 57,500 PSI for a max average pressure for the 9.3 by 62. Now those are the SAMI specs. CIP specs are a little bit different, but there's a similar difference between these two cartridges. Now as you can see, the 370 Sako is a little bit longer than the 9.3 by 62. 9.3 by 62 has a max SAMI overall length of 3.29 inches. The 370 Sako has a max length of 3.34 inches. So it's just a little bit longer, takes up essentially all the length, all the space that is available in a standard 30-06 length rifle action. And both cartridges have the same 0.470 inch case head diameter, and they use a standard size, not a Magnum size bolt face. So the end result is the 370 Sako is a little bit larger, a little bit more powerful, higher pressure cartridge than the 9.3 by 62. So how does that shake out in the real world? Well, for instance, Federal offers this load in their Safari line for the 370 Sako, shooting a 286 grain Swift A-frame at 2550 feet per second. A pretty standard load for the 9.3 by 62 is that same 286 grain bullet at about 2,360 feet per second. So that works out to 4129 foot-pounds of energy for the 370 Sako versus just over 3,500 foot-pounds of muzzle energy for the 9.3 by 62. So the 370 Sako has about 16% more muzzle energy than the 9.3 by 62, and this is due to the fact that it shoots the exact same bullet about 190 feet per second faster. So how does the 370 Sako compare to the 375 H&H Magnum? Well, the 375 H&H Magnum, a typical load for it will shoot a 300 grain 375 caliber bullet at around 2,500, 2,550 feet per second. That works out to just over 4,100 foot-pounds of energy with a muzzle velocity of 2,500 feet per second. So almost identical to the advertised specs for the 370 Sako. But that said, the 375 H&H does have a little bit higher ceiling. It's a little bit larger caliber cartridge, right? 375 caliber versus 366 caliber for the 9.3 by 62 and the 370 Sako. And it also can use a little bit heavier bullets, right? 286 grains versus 300 grains being a typical load there. Also, the 375 H&H falls on the correct side of the 375 caliber minimum some countries have for hunting thick-skinned, dangerous game in Africa. Zimbabwe is one exception to that rule. They have a 9.2 millimeter minimum caliber for hunting game like buffalo there. So the 370 Sako and the 9.3 by 62 both are acceptable cartridges in that country. But on the plus side for the 370 Sako, it will fit in a 30-06 length action, whereas the 375 H&H requires a longer Magnum length action. 3.34 inch maximum overall length for the 370 Sako, 3.6 inch Magnum overall length for the 375 H&H. The 370 Sako also uses a little bit more narrow cartridge case than the 375 does as well. So this works with a standard bolt face, whereas the 375 requires a larger Magnum bolt face. So the details do vary a lot here, but the idea with the 370 Sako is you can put it in any rifle that will work with the 30-06 cartridge, just rebarrel it, rechamber it, all of that stuff. And so you can use a smaller, a little bit more compact, lighter rifle for the 370 Sako. And depending on the details with the rifle and all that stuff, you can potentially get more rounds in the magazine. Now this Sako 85 I showed you earlier can fit 5 rounds of 370 Sako in the magazine, which is pretty impressive for a cartridge or of a rifle that is as svelte as this one is. Now that said, some rifles like the CZ550 can also hold 5 rounds of 375 down in the magazine, but that rifle is also a little bit chunkier than the Sako 85 too. Now the other advantage of the 370 Sako is it generates that performance with a little bit less recoil than the 375 H&H. So here is what I mean. Now this rifle I just showed you weighs 8.6 pounds fully loaded, right? With a scope, full magazine, sling, exactly like how you would hunt with it. I have a Ruger M77 Hawkeye in 9.3x62 that weighs exactly the same, fully loaded. So let's compare recoil for these 3 cartridges when all 3 of them are fired from a rifle that weighs 8.6 pounds. So the 9.3x62 with a standard load, right, 286 grain bullet at 2360 feet per second, generates 33.5 foot-pounds of free recoil energy, 8.6 pound rifle. 370 Sako, 39 foot-pounds of free recoil energy. 375 H&H, 47.5 foot-pounds of free recoil energy. Once again, all 3 are in an 8.6 pound rifle. So the 370 Sako generates about 16% more recoil than the 9.3x62, but that makes sense. Shooting the same weight bullet a little bit faster and uses a little bit more powder to do that. And the 370 Sako also generates about 18% less recoil than the 375 H&H, but that also makes sense, using less recoil, or excuse me, less powder to shoot a little bit lighter weight bullet at about the same velocity as the 375. So the 370 Sako, good all-around cartridge, right? You have a great trajectory with it, almost on par with, say, a 30-06, but it also hits a little bit harder than the 9.3x62 and about on the level, maybe a little bit less than a 375 H&H. Now that is not to say that the 9.3x62 is lacking or any of that stuff in the power department. A lot of people have killed buffalo and other thick-skinned dangerous game with the 9.3x62, right? I have myself. I've killed an elephant and a buffalo, among other animals, with mine, but the 370 Sako, just a little bit more in that area. And it also falls on the correct side of the 4,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy minimum some countries do have for hunting thick-skinned dangerous game. And like I said earlier, the 9.3x62, typical factory load for it is generating around 3,500 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, and it just, that's less than 4,000. So regardless of the capabilities of the cartridge, it's not legal to hunt with for thick-skinned dangerous game everywhere. So I think the 370 Sako was a good idea, but it just didn't really work out in concept. Sure, it's more powerful than the 9.3x62, but the 9.3x62 is still a darned good cartridge itself. And at the same time, even though it's more powerful than it still falls a little bit shy of the 375 H&H, and once again, it doesn't meet that 375 caliber minimum that some countries have. So it seems like we're in kind of a weird in-between world here where people that wanted something that's on the little bit lighter side, didn't want to go all the way up to a 375 H&H, they would use the 9.3x62, and other people that wanted to go farther would use a 375 H&H or something even more powerful than that, just not leaving a lot of space in the middle for the 370 Sako. Now, Sako is the only rifle company I am aware of that ever mass-produced rifles in 370 Sako. And I have this Sako 85 in that chambering I borrowed from a listener. Thank you very much for letting me use this mark. I also have this Federal ammunition out here. Now, Federal is also the only North American company anyway that ever made factory ammo for this cartridge too. So we'll shoot this Federal factory ammo in this rifle. We'll see what sort of accuracy and velocity we get. Also do a little report on, at least we'll just see what recoil feels like. So stand by. Okay, interestingly, this Federal factory ammo, even though it is advertised at shooting that 286 grain A-frame at 2550 feet per second, was going quite a bit slower out of this rifle. Now this rifle has a 22-inch long barrel, but even so, average velocity for that shot string that I shot with it was 2363 feet per second. That is basically 9.3 by 62 millimeter velocities. So I would expect a little bit of a drop off with velocities with a 2-inch shorter long barrel like that, but not something on that level. So I'm not exactly sure what the deal is. I'm not sure if this is slow ammo or if this is a slow rifle or what, but that is very underwhelming performance. Now accuracy was great though. I mean, you can see that group right there. Just, that was my first 3 shots out of the rifle. Just boom, 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 all right there in the bullseye. So certainly something to like about there. Not sure what the heck is going on with the velocity. Now I bought this ammo back in early 2024 and I called up Federal the other day, showed them the lot number for it. You can see the lot number right there. The guy I talked to on the phone from Federal said this ammo was produced all the way back in 2010 and I bought it off the Federal website too. I talked to Mark, the guy I borrowed this rifle from, and he also had a couple boxes of this exact same lot of Federal ammo. So this ammo is 15 years old now, and it's still hanging around out there. He and I bought it at different times in different places, just so happened to be the same lot. And the guy I talked to on the phone from Federal said that he's actually never seen any of this ammo before either. So if I bought some ammo directly from Federal, that's 15 years old, doesn't seem like they make this stuff very often. So even though these factory ammo velocities are disappointing, it seems like the cartridge does have the potential to get going faster. I don't know why it's the case, but you can do that. Mark said that he did some hand loading for it, and he said that he got these 286 grain A-frames going well north of 2,400 feet per second. Accuracy was good, no pressure signs, any of that stuff, and he still had some load data to go to get to a max load. But he said that he just stopped there because it was giving him what he wanted, and accuracy and everything, like I said, was great. He also made a hand load with some 250 grain Nosler Accubons. I shot a couple of his hand loads out here just for grins. Let's see how fast they were going for me. 2669 feet per second for them. So quite, pretty speedy load here. And he also said that he could have got those going a little bit hotter as well if he were so inclined. But once again, right, accuracy was good. Everything was going the way he wanted it to. And so he just decided to stop there. He took this rifle and this ammo with the 250 grain Accubon to Mozambique a couple years ago and shot a very nice eland bull with it. Said it worked great. Now we can debate the reasons why, but it seems like the 370 Sako is a dying cartridge, at least in the USA. Anyway, sure, it'll work great if you have one, right? Mark killed that really nice eland with no issues whatsoever with it. You could use it on all manner of game, from wild boar and deer all the way up to moose, eland, things like that. It'll work great if you have one. But it really seems like this cartridge does not provide enough of a distinction between the 9.3 by 62 and the 375 H&H, both of which are much more established cartridges. At this instant, there are 2 370 Sako rifles for sale on Gunbroker. And like I said, Federal's the only company I know of that, at least in North America anyway, that made ammo for this cartridge. And they made an offering with the A-frame that I just shot. They also made an offering with the Woodley Hydro Solid. Well, Federal lists both of those loads as discontinued on their website right now. Sako does not make the 85 in 370 Sako anymore either, so things seem to be going down the tubes for this cartridge. Now Federal does have both of their factory loads for sale. They are available for sale on their website at a discount too, but I get the impression that when they're gone with that stuff. So that's too bad for those of you that have a rifle in this chambering. Now, if you have one and you have ammo or you hand load, and there are good components still available out there for it, it'll work great. Anything you'd reasonably hunt with a 9.3x62 or a 375 H&H, the 370 Sako will work great on it too. Like I said, deer, bear, wild boar, hippo, buffalo, all that stuff, you could very reasonably take it with a 370 Sako. So let me know your thoughts on this subject. Do you have a 370 Sako rifle? Have you hunted with it? Let me know. What have you hunted with it? What rifle, what ammo, all that stuff did you use? Tell me about how it performed for you. Likewise, leave a comment on this video with requests that you have for future topics you want me to cover on the show. And if you enjoyed this video and you want more content along these lines, visit thebiggamehuntingblog.com/ebook, or at the link in the pinned comment or episode description. Sign up there, get a free ebook I have written on the best hunting cartridges. Now make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that thumbs up button as well if you enjoyed this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great day and good hunting.